when people actually get fired. So there were two very different stories that came out with regard to corporate crackdowns on free speech over the last couple of weeks. Last week, we had the big blow up because the NFL banned kneeling during the national anthem on the sidelines. They said, you want to stay in the locker room, go ahead and stay in the locker room. But if you come out of the locker room and they're playing the national anthem, don't kneel or we're going to fine you. And people went nuts. This is a violation of First Amendment freedoms. This is a violation of the spirit of free speech in America. And, you know, for myself, I'm mildly uncomfortable with the idea that the NFL is going to force people to stand for the anthem. But as I said last week, I think that kneeling for the anthem is a stupid, counterproductive, garbagey thing to do as a general rule. And I also think that the NFL has a right to defend its product. Well, this week, the Roseanne thing happened, and ABC immediately fired Roseanne. And half the people who were very angry at the NFL for barring people from kneeling were very happy with ABC for firing Roseanne. Now, obviously, kneeling for the anthem and calling a black person an ape are not the same thing. Colin Kaepernick, I will point out, didn't only kneel for the anthem, he also wore socks that had cops depicted as pigs on them. So that wasn't exactly a wonderful thing. But the broader point is one that needs to be made, and that is, when should we, the American public, be interested in the political pronouncements and racist pronouncements and gross pronouncements of public figures? When should we forgive them? When should we not? When should they be fired by companies and when should they not? And it seems to me that the line of demarcation is when the speech that is being used actually damages the product of the corporation. So here we're not talking about the government getting involved. We're not talking about when the government should crack down on speech. The answer is the government should never crack down on speech. The government should not be arresting Roseanne Barr for saying vile things. The question is, when can a company fire Roseanne, and when is it right to boycott Roseanne's show, for example? Or when is it right to boycott the NFL, and when can the NFL institute new rules about kneeling? And it seems to me that when the product is connected with the viewpoint, then it is appropriate to initiate a boycott, and it is also appropriate for a corporation to respond in kind to that boycott. So, with regard to the NFL, the product that they produced was a product that included the national anthem on TV. It was part of the game. The NFL is replete with patriotic symbolism. They use it all the time. When I was at the Super Bowl last year, it was fully patriotic, and the video of the Blue Angels fly over the whole thing. So if that is threatened, and people say, listen, I don't feel the same way about that product as I used to because the product itself has changed, that's not out of the realm of reality or decency. Boycotting the NFL because you don't like people kneeling for the anthem seems to me well within the bounds of normal public discourse. The same thing holds true for Roseanne, right? Roseanne even more so, because Roseanne's character is called Roseanne, right? The show is based on Roseanne. So if Roseanne were playing a completely different character, I think you might even have a more dicey situation. So Matt Damon says a lot of really stupid things. I don't boycott Matt Damon's movies because in Matt Damon's movies, Matt Damon is not playing Matt Damon. Matt Damon is playing whatever character he's playing on screen. So the product on screen has nothing to do with the stupid crap Matt Damon says off screen. Now, if there are people who can't make that connection, if there are people who feel that every time they see Matt Damon on screen, it reminds them of his dumb comments in the past, and so they don't want to see whatever movie he's made this year, that's reasonable, but I think that it's a little bit over the top. The thing about Roseanne is that Roseanne played Roseanne on TV. Her character was supposed to mirror Roseanne to a certain extent in real life. So for people to say, I don't want to watch a show with a lady who calls a black lady an ape, I think that's perfectly appropriate, and it's perfectly appropriate for ABC to crack down. Now, here's where it's not appropriate. It's not appropriate when you have somebody like Brendan Eich, who is CEO of Mozilla Firefox, and Brendan Eich was essentially thrown out of his job because someone initiated a boycott because he had once supported traditional marriage. The reason that is inappropriate is because Mozilla Firefox never discriminated against gay people. Mozilla Firefox took no stance on same-sex marriage. Mozilla Firefox's product had nothing to do with same-sex marriage. So it's unreasonable to boycott Mozilla Firefox based on Brendan Eich's personal political beliefs. Okay, and it is inappropriate to boycott a church for their beliefs if those beliefs don't actually affect how they treat people. And it is inappropriate to boycott a restaurant for those reasons. So Chick-fil-A, best example. Okay, Dan Cathy is the head of Chick-fil-A in favor of traditional marriage. The left launches massive boycotts against Dan Cathy and Chick-fil-A, saying we don't want to shop at that company because that guy doesn't agree with us on same-sex marriage. What does same-sex marriage have to do with a chicken burger? The answer is nothing. So in those cases, you're destroying the nature of free speech, the feeling of free speech in the country, when you make everything political. Making everything political is bad for the country, but pretending that everything is not political is just unrealistic. Roseanne did something that impacted the product she was providing. Kneeling for the anthem impacted the product you were providing. Those are not the same sort of impact, obviously. Kneeling for the anthem is not nearly as bad as calling a black person an ape. But insofar as do the corporations have the right on a moral level to fire people for doing this or to set new rules? The answer, of course, is yes. Now, meanwhile, President Trump has fired back on the ROSEANNE thing. He just couldn't help himself. So he went all of yesterday without commenting on it, and I was like, yes, this is great. Mr. President, just stay out of it. There's no reason for you to get involved. And then he got involved because that's what the President of the United States does. So he tweeted this out. He tweeted out, quote, Bob Iger of ABC called Valerie Jarrett to let her know that ABC does not tolerate comments like those made by Roseanne Barr. Gee, he never called President Donald J. Trump to apologize for the horrible statements made and said about me on ABC. Maybe I just didn't get the call. Only President Trump could make this story about him. Only President Trump could make a story about Roseanne insulting Valerie Jarrett about him. I do want to point out a couple of distinctions here. Okay, listen, I don't think Trump should have commented on this thing in the first place. I'm going to get to in a second Trump's relationship with celebrity, which I think is just dumb. But here's why this tweet is stupid. First, Valerie Jarrett was called an ape by the main star of Bob Iger's network. Okay, a black person was called an ape by the main star of Bob Iger's network. He has to call Valerie Jarrett. Donald Trump was called a lot of names on ABC, but he was not called a historically racist name applied to his race. Okay, that's not, if somebody called him honky on ABC, then I assume that Bob Iger might have to call him. But if they were just saying they don't like Donald Trump or he's an idiot or he's stupid or he's garbage or whatever they were calling Donald Trump, like that's just part of the public discourse, honestly. And again, I don't know what any of this has to do with Trump. Trump's not the victim here. He's the president of the United States. I understand the main point, which is that there's a double standard in the media, and obviously that is true. But the double standard in the media doesn't really extend to Bob Iger having to call Trump every time someone insults him. Plus, I mean, if we're going to talk about insulting people, Donald Trump is like the king of insulting people.